Hello, everyone, and welcome to session 4 of our middle school and high school literacy professional development series. My name is Natalie Kleber, and I am the resident middle school and high school literacy PD specialist here at the State Department of Education. Today, session 4 will focus on reading fluency, specifically in middle school and high school classrooms. So in the last session, we spent time defining what morphology is, the impact it has on middle and high school students specifically, and designing morphological awareness activities to improve vocabulary awareness and reading comprehension that coincide with the lessons that you're already teaching. Today's objective is that by the end of the session, you'll be able to understand how fluency practice can improve students' proficiency in reading at the middle and high school level. That it's not too late to work on these things and that a little bit of time can really pay off. You're also going to be able to determine where in a lesson fluency practice may fit, as well as the parameters for implementing fluency practice effectively. So first of all, let's discuss what is reading fluency. So the National Reading Panel defines reading fluency as the ability to read text with the appropriate rate. So we're not too fast and we're not too slow, the appropriate accuracy and correctness in how you read it, and the appropriate prosody. Reading fluency depends on how well developed word recognition skills that are required through systematic, explicit instruction in phonemic and phonological awareness and phonics. And strong language comprehension skills also support reading fluency. And that's those two places in the reading rope. We're going to talk more about that on the next slide if you missed the first 3 sessions. As a student's decoding automaticity increases, reading fluency increases. So as they become more automatic in decoding these words and reading these words, individually, their fluency is going to increase. They're going to read at a more appropriate rate, a more appropriate accuracy, and again, with more appropriate prosody. What has to do with those language conventions, speaking in the way that, or reading in the way that we speak, acknowledging punctuation, those types of things. So again, here is Scarborough's reading rope. We have this upper strand, which focuses on language comprehension. We've said in the first 3 sessions that in the middle school and high school arena, the majority of our development continues in this upper strand. And then the lower strand is word recognition skills. And we hope that students come to us in the secondary level with these skills well developed, but that's not always the case. So as language comprehension becomes more strategic and as word recognition becomes more automatic, we then have skilled readers. And so reading fluency essentially lives in all strands of the rope. So just like with morphology, I said it has a place in vocabulary in the upper strand, as well as decoding in that lower strand. There's a lot of implications for developing fluency because it affects so many different areas of the rope. So fluency improves proficiency in all content areas. Fluency is said to be the bridge between that upper and that lower strand, between word recognition and comprehension. And slow and laborious reading is frustrating for secondary students, and it often leads to them avoiding reading altogether. These are our students who are not going to raise their hand typically, unless they feel super comfortable to read. These are the ones that we're going to have to kind of stay on to do their independent reading if that's assigned. So we want to help students become better with this so that they become more, not just able, but want to read more. There's a correlation between reading fluency and reading comprehension. So in addition to instruction and comprehension strategies, teaching students to read fluently may help them better understand what they read. So what that means is if students are able to read at the appropriate pace, with the appropriate accuracy, they're going to comprehend what they're reading better because they're not choppy. They're able to read through it with the proper inflection and get the words fast enough to where it creates meaning as they go. If students spend most of their effort focused on just word recognition, what is this word? What does this word say? What does this word mean? Or reading one word at a time without phrasing, their ability to comprehend text is compromised. They're going to suffer. The reading comprehension is going to suffer. So let's talk about determining if a reader is fluent. The first thing, if a student is struggling to read fluently in class, if you're doing some read alouds and you notice that the student, it might be choppy reading or skipping words or getting a lot of words incorrect, you're correcting students, in what they read. That's another important thing that we don't really recognize in middle school and high school. Motivation sometimes isn't as high in middle school and high school, but it's really important that we're pointing out words that are not pronounced correctly and not drawing attention and saying, oh my goodness, that's incorrect. But if they read the word struggling and they read it incorrectly, just going back and say, okay, struggling as they're reading, so that now as they see struggling again, they know. And telling them why you do that, telling them, okay, guys, Ms. Cleaver's job is to help you become better readers and more fluent readers. And so as we see these words, if they're not correct the first time, we'll talk about what the correct pronunciation is so that you get better again. Little side note as we're going through this. So they should be assessed using grade level passages to determine their words correct per minute score and reading accuracy. We're going to talk in a minute about where you might be able to find some of those probes or passages and how to compute that. So assuming a minimum accuracy rate of 95%, a student's words correct per minute or WCPM score can be compared to fluency norms to determine their reading percentile. So what that means is as they're reading, they have to get at least 95% of the words correct or greater. And then it's going to tell you when you look at the fluency norms chart, they're in the 50th percentile in this grade level, or they're in the 75th percentile in this grade level. Fluency norms have been established for students until grade 6. There's some other resources out there that kind of predict what goes beyond, but it doesn't really climb at all. And the reason for that is the norms set at 6th grade are the expected fluency beyond 6th grade. By 6th grade, students should be able to read 146 words per minute at the 50th percentile. And so the 95th percentile, I believe, is like 170 words per minute. So we as adults are expected to read that many words per minute. It doesn't go beyond that. Preparing for fluency practice for non-fluent readers. So if you administer the probe and you notice that the student falls below the 50th percentile, for your grade level. We need to talk about how do we set this up so that we provide them with the appropriate practice they need so that they become more fluent readers. So you're going to group the students homogenously based on their reading levels. And so there are many different diagnostic screeners that you can give and administer that will say 3rd grade reading level, 5th grade reading level, 7th grade reading level. Once you administer those, you're going to take the ones that are similar. So you're going to take all of the beginning, maybe 7th grade, and all of the end 7th grade, and group those together and pull them to you in homogeneous or same groups. You're going to limit the groups to about 4 students. When you get beyond 4 students, it's much harder to give that prescriptive feedback to students as you're reading with them so that they are improving their fluency. Groups should rotate to the teacher every 15 minutes or so. So it doesn't need to be something that they're sitting with you for 30 minutes. They're probably tuned out beyond that anyway, but setting a timer around 15 minutes and having those students sit with you. I'm going to go over the process you should be doing with them in those groups and then rotating to another group in 15 minutes. Or maybe you have time just for 15 minutes and then the next day you see another group. This is a perfect activity for intervention time if you have an intervention time allotted within your school in the ELA. Most other content areas may not have this intervention block designed, but if you do, it's a great thing to do no matter the content area, because becoming a fluent reader in science is going to help them understand what they're reading in science better. Becoming a fluent reader in social studies is going to help them understand social studies content better. So it just benefits, and it benefits them beyond our content areas in life. If there is no intervention time allotted, if that's not something already built into your school, teachers can carve out 15 minutes a day of their content area or designate 1 day a week to do small group. And I definitely encourage you to get with your department head or your administrator to talk about this first, obviously, but maybe you decide it's best with your administrator to do 15 minutes a day, or maybe you decide Monday through Thursday we have core instruction, Fridays we're going to start pulling these small groups and rotating through all of the groups. It's going to be what fits best for you and your campus, and partner with your administrator. You're going to pick out fluency passages based on the student's independent reading level. And a student's independent reading level is where a student is reading with 95 to 100% accuracy. So what that means is no more than 1 in 20 words are difficult for that student. And this might mean If you're a ninth grade English 1 teacher, you might have to pull in a 6th grade reading passage for that small group. It's going to depend. It's not going to be something that maybe curriculum based on that level. You definitely need to do your curriculum text. The purposes of these are so that students can access that on level rich curriculum text. They need that. But this practice helps them get the skills so they can achieve that on their own independently too. So what are the expectations for small groups? I find that I was a teacher coach for 5 years and I supported all the content areas. I've supported kindergarten all the way up to 9th grade, some help in 10th. And we as secondary teachers and secondary teacher coaches, we're not as familiar with like centers or small groups. And I find that if your expectations are super clear, this runs so well and you're going to see such a huge payoff. So if you notice the first time that you do this, it doesn't go as well as you would hoped or you thought it would, bring them back the next day, re-explain the expectations, make them very clear, and you're going to see that really pay off quickly. So here are just some suggestions for that. What work will students that are not in the small group, what would they be doing? So if you have your small group of 4 students, what is the rest of the class doing? Make sure you're thinking through that first. How will students be held accountable for the work? So the whole class of students, are they working on an exit ticket while you're pulling small group? Are they doing an extension of the lesson while you're pulling your small group? Do you have a computer-based program that they're working on while you're pulling small group? You need to determine what they're doing and hold them accountable. So it might be just completion for that day, a check mark. And you get back with them on feedback of you completed this many assignments this week, or it might be a participation grade if you have that in your pupil progression for your district. It just depends, but you need to have a system for what they're doing and how they're held accountable because they have to know that. You should definitely model the volume that should be used in small groups. And this is something in secondary that the first time, especially in middle school, if it's not the appropriate volume that you ask them to have and you model for them, stop what you're doing, pull them back in, have a student model the appropriate volume and re-release them. If the expectation is clear, it's going to run much smoother going forward. A timer should be visible for the students. So the accountability, the timer is going to keep them on task. So you have more focus and effort that you can invest in that small group, and it should be visible. Don't just start the timer. They need to see, okay, if Ms. Cleaver wants me to finish this exit ticket in 15 minutes, I have 7 minutes left or 5 minutes left. So it's keeping them on track. And then keeping students informed of their progress in those small groups. If you want students to truly engage in the small group with you and practice and improve in their fluency, they need to see, okay, I was reading 45 words correct per minute, and now 3 weeks later with Ms. Kleber, I'm reading 72 words per minute, and this is going to help me on my test. It's going to help me read better. They need that buy-in so that they really get the most out of the time they have with you. Communicate to students the purpose for this activity and how this will translate to gains for them in the future. Be as specific as possible. Paint a picture for them. If they're contributing and they're participating in this fluency practice, it's going to mean better grades in the class, or it's going to mean higher scores on my test, or it's going to mean later in life I'm a better reader, and what reading rates can be attributed to later in life as well. Students need to buy into the activity in order for it to be effective. So finding fluency passages. This might not be something, again, in secondary that we're super familiar with. Most high quality ELA curriculum offer fluency passages in their supports. So there's a support section and they have fluency passages in there. Guidebooks is one that has it. Most high quality ELA curriculum do. If you're outside of ELA though, and you're interested in doing this, Achieve the Core is a free source. There's a live link right here, and fluency passages can be found here as well. So many different, they're used as informational texts, but they're going to coincide with science topics, social studies topics, or potentially even math topics that you can find there at that source. So again, you want to pick one that is age appropriate to their independent reading level. So fluency practices should look like this. You're going to explicitly and directly teach them how to read more fluently. So after you've explained the purpose, after you've explained the expectations to the students who are either in the small group or outside of the small group, you're going to walk them through how to do this in your small group when you pull them. your 4 students, around 4 students. You're going to walk students through previewing the text. Okay, this is the title of the text. It's going to helps me predict what the text might be about, and any other things you have in the text you think you should draw their attention to preview it. Model how the text should be read with the appropriate rate and prosody. So some students read so fast they have no idea what they just read. Some students read so slow that they don't read fast enough to build meaning. You want to, before they even read it, you want to model the appropriate rate. You want to model the appropriate prosody. Okay, so the appropriate inflection. You're going to show them, what to do at certain. So if there's a comma, you're going to model how to pause at a comma. You're going to model what you should sound like when you read something that has an exclamation point at the end or a question mark on the end. You're going to model for that for them. Where necessary, explain prosody. So as I'm reading, I might stop and say, okay, I paused at this comma because when I see a comma, I know that the author wants me to stop, just take a second and then move on. You don't need to do this for all of your small groups, but if you notice that students are skipping punctuation or it's affecting their understanding and the meaning of the passage because they're not paying attention to these things, drawing attention so they know to do it in the future will help. I know when I used to pull, especially my English language learners to me, a lot of times they would ignore all punctuation and they were learning a new language for the first time. So modeling that for them and why is going to help them in the future. Moving through a progression of scaffolds after modeling. So I'm going to model it the first time and model how to read it correctly with the appropriate, like I said, rate and prosody. Then we might do an echo reading. I read a line, you read a line. We might do choral reading where we all read it together. Okay, we're reading lines 1 through 3 together. After you've done those different levels of scaffolding down, then you could ask them to independently read it out loud to your small group. But conducting these 3 to 4 reads of the passage will ensure students are building their sight word recognition. And so as they see those words in passages later, they're going to recognize them much more quickly, and it's going to improve their fluency as they go, not just in your content area text, but all over. If you're using one of the fluency-based passages from your curriculum, from your ELA curriculum, these have some of the same words in them that they're seeing in their content area text. So it's going to help them with the unit that they're reading at that time. You want to provide frequent corrective feedback to students as they are reading. So help pronounce an incorrect word. Explain it to them, like I said in the some previous slides, why you're correcting them, and it's to help them understand. And when they see that word again, they do it right the next time. But it needs to be immediate. If they mispronounce that word, they're going to mispronounce it again, and it defeats the purpose of having the fluency practice. Moving to time reading eventually so that students can increase their words per minute. So maybe the first time you do this, they're just reading, you have those 3 to 4 reads. As you go, you're going to start timing it and say, okay, let's see how many you get correct in your minute. And then start to measure that. And that's as you're able to keep them informed of their progress in that small group. You can also, and I encourage you to check for understanding questions as students progress through the readings. So maybe by the second, the third, or maybe even just all the way to the 4th reading, you start asking some questions like, okay, who did this in the passage, or what did that lead to? And you want to stick with questions on where they are and build from there. Definitely build up, but this is going to help to improve their comprehension and not just fluency, but you're focusing on both of those things as you're doing this practice with them. Next steps if they're not progressing. So you have your small groups, you've been pulling them and rotating through them for a couple of weeks now, and you notice that one student in the blue group, if you have color groups, is not progressing at all. They are not reading any more words correctly per minute than they were a couple weeks ago. You need to refer that student to either your department head or your school administration, or if you know that you have an SBLC team at your school, a school building level committee, refer them to that group so that the student can get other diagnostic screeners to see what might be the problem. Very little or no progress could indicate that students need help with word recognition skills, that lower strand in the rope, such as decoding or phonics skills, or maybe phonemic awareness skills even. And as a secondary reading teacher, you might not be versed in how to help those things, so they need to be aware of that. So they're helping develop those lower strand skills to become more proficient in the upper strand. Some final thoughts. So, fluent readers in middle and high school will lead to higher proficiency in the content areas, as well as produce lifelong learners, which is what our goal is with our students. And I think it's just important to note as well. I told you how to have explicit instruction within your small groups, but there are different teacher moves that you can use in your whole class as you go through text, such as, whole class read alouds, partner reading, independent reading, all of those things as they read through this multiple times increases their fluency. It's fluency practice. So if you're asking them to do a partner read after you've read it aloud together as a class, or maybe before you do it, preview it, this is helping to build their fluency as well for all the students, but you might have that subgroup of students that need additional support with this small group pulling as well. Fluency practice at this level can take as little as 15 minutes per day and can make a substantial difference. The more exposure they have to these words, the more you're building their sight vocabulary. And it's just going to give them so much more confidence as they're reading through their different classes and just like I said, later in life. Okay, so I want you to stop and I want you to think about, where does fluency practice fit inside of your day or your week? I want you to think about that. What resources do you still need to implement fluency practice? Do you need to go back into your curriculum to pull those passages? Do you need to go to Achieve the Core or a different resource that I haven't mentioned? Where do you need to go to pull those fluency practice things? There's lots paid for programs, but there's a ton of free resources too. And the ones that I mentioned are free. How will having mostly fluent readers impact your classroom? And I think that's the most important question you can ask yourself. I know in secondary, we are charged as teachers to get through the content very quickly and within the scope of things. But if we take a second to focus on building some of these basic core skills, we'll go much quicker in the long run, but not just quicker, but quicker with the students understanding the material and retaining the material. So the payoff is there. As always, if you have any questions or suggestions, please contact us at either louisianaliteracy@la.gov or me directly at natalie.kleber@la.gov. If you have questions or comments about this particular session, or you have suggestions for future sessions, I am all ears. I would also love if you need my help independently through Zoom or in person, please reach out. I'll make myself available to you. And thank you so much for tuning in. Bye, guys.